Starting stream. All right. Headphones engage.
Oh, yeah.
And we are live.
Wow.
All right. Welcome back to the Dangerzone. So quickly, I'm here with my second guest of the day, Paul Brown. He's a Marine and what else? Author and congressional candidate back in 2016 race, and he also happens to be my cousin.
Thanks for having me here, bro.
Yeah, welcome, dude.
Yeah.
So you're an author. You wrote a short book called Total War.
Yeah.
America's
Roadmap to
Victory. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Short book, long essay, somewhere in that range. I wrote it at the end of 2014. Little of my background, I was in the Marine Corps. We were all one big military family. My dad was in the Marine Corps. My brother served in the Marine Corps. A lot of us deployed and everything. And, if any of y'all were watching with Sam on here, we grew up together and we grew up learning about war. And that was our game. It was, what kind of war are we playing today? Jungle warfare, savannah warfare, desert warfare, pirate day warfare, night day warfare, on and on. So we grew up with that ingrained in us, and it was something we really learned a lot about. And then we went off and experienced it, and then it became very real, and it also became not just play but academic. We've all, in our own ways, become students of warfare, and what I saw over the years was just how lacking our method, the United States method for approaching war, has been for a very long time. And that's kind of what Total War captures. It captures the idea that really since World War II, we've been fighting what's known as limited war.
Yeah.
And the difference basically between total war and limited war is in total war, you do whatever you have to win. And usually people think of it and it encapsulates even what your economy is doing. During World War II, our entire economy was mobilized to support the war effort. I mean, in the civilian population, there was rationing and there were curfew, lights out. You couldn't just be driving around after 10 p.m. at night because you're using up extra gas and you've got lights on the road, and if a spy plane or bombers, God forbid, came over, it would be easier to find targets.
Yeah.
But what I focus on more is the actual strategy and tactics employed in war. And what we saw starting in the Korean War was a hesitancy. We held back. And it was less so at the tactical level at that point, and far more so at the strategic level. We were afraid of China getting involved, so there were geographic areas that we chose not to surpass. That we held back on our aggression. Again, at the tactical level, we weren't seeing a huge difference from the way we'd been fighting in World War II, and that limited us. And the results of the Korean War were essentially a tie.
Yeah, I mean, we're technically in a ceasefire.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. We're technically still at war,
which is
it's
wild.
Crazy. It's crazy. You go to the DMZ, and obviously it's typically pretty peaceful there, but there is a insane history of little flare-ups that have occurred there.
Yeah.
You may have heard of the I think it was called the Paul Bunyan incident.
Yes. Yeah.
Which
let's talk about
is
that.
mind-blowing. There was this tree that was blocking a South Korean guard post where there were U.S. troops there and South Korean troops, and a small contingent of U.S. troops went down to chop it down. And the DMZ is very heavily regulated. There can only be so many troops there at a time. Only so many of them can be armed in one way or another. And everyone's watching to make sure everyone's playing by the rules. But as is often the case, usually the good guys play by the rules and the bad guys don't. So there was an officer, and I believe it was I can't remember if it was an officer and a couple enlisted men or a couple officers. They were chopping down the tree, and a North Korean officer with a couple of his guys came, and they were like, stop. And they just kept on going, just ignore them. They're following the SOP. And then they say again, stop. This was planted by like the deer leader or whatever. By the way, this was back in I think the 1960s or 70s.
So shortly after.
So yeah, it was a while ago. They keep on going, and finally, the officer pulls out an axe and hits the U.S. officer, and the other guys with him come out with axes. They kill him. They like hack him to death. And because of where it wasn't clear that had happened yet to the South Koreans and U.S. troops there that weren't right there with the working party. So it took them a while to figure it out. Finally they send people over there, and they see, wow, like this got real. So they get them out of there, and the next day, I believe it was called Operation Paul Bunyan. They send in the South Korean and U.S. combined forces, a convoy of troops armed to the teeth. It's like several platoons worth. They set up security. They had bombers and fighters flying overhead along the border. And South Korean special operations, I can't remember what unit specifically, went over to the bridge between both sides with claymore mines strapped to their chest. Claymore mines, and yelled at the North Koreans to come over, just like taunting them.
Yeah.
Like ready with clackers to push the buttons and just, end it. It was this just
in themselves.
In themselves.
And
yeah,
whoever's in front of them, yeah.
They're just yelling, just blood veins popping and just this palpable anger. And we go, and we don't just cut down the tree at the base. Like if this is the tree here, we cut it up 20 feet high.
Yeah.
To leave this like super obvious stump as a sign, like we came over here, and when push came to shove, you guys weren't up to it, and they didn't do a thing. They obviously the actions they took before, like we didn't kill any of their guys in retaliation, at least not at that time. But I mean, there were a lot of little events like that have occurred at the DMZ over the years, and most people just aren't aware of it. So anyway, kind of tangent there. In Vietnam, you start to see not only strategic and large-scale geographic shifts from total war to limited war, but you start to see those tactical shifts as well.
Yeah.
You have a much smaller number of troops deployed. You also have a lot more geographic restrictions. The Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, and the North Vietnamese army used very, very heavily Laos and Cambodia to move troops, to move supplies, to move everything. I mean, they just giant areas. And we decided that was fair game for bombing, but nothing else. We weren't going to go in there and fight them, at least not till the very end of the war. Yeah. And it was too little too late. So
basically going back to the whole holding back.
Yes.
Like, we have the ability to stop what's happening and defeat the enemy. I guess that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
We know how to stop it, but for whatever reason, we put the political restraints and strategic restraints on ourselves of not doing what's necessary.
Absolutely.
Whereas in World War II, we're pushing through country to country.
Yes. Yes. I mean, look at numbers here. People don't realize this. We mobilized something like 500,000 troops in Operation Desert Storm, and the tiny, short little war that's a blip on a lot of people's radars. 500,000.
Yeah.
That's not including the Allied coalition troops that were with us, roughly another 200,000. At our height in Iraq, since Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, our height, we had 166,000 troops in country.
Wow.
166. In Afghanistan, at the height of that, we had 100,000 troops.
Yeah.
And you're looking at a 500,000 versus... And even with those 500,000, the results we got were limited. Yes, we won. Clearly, it was a clear tactical and strategic victory over Saddam Hussein. But then we left, and Saddam Hussein was still there.
Yeah.
And so, I'm belaboring the point a little bit, but the result, there's a couple of really, really negative results out of this. We get involved in all these wars that we don't have a clear victory outcome from. I mean, we've got a pretty long track record now going to Korea's a tie, Vietnam's a loss, Somalia, our involvement there, I would call that a loss. Iraq and Afghanistan technically aren't over yet, even though President Obama declared the war in Iraq over in 2011 and the war in Afghanistan over in 2014. We have thousands of boots on the ground in both those locations, as well as in Syria and Libya and Somalia and Nigeria and Yemen. The list goes on. So not only we're not winning these, which is bad for those specific outcomes, it's bad for the amount we've sacrificed and lost on those things. It's also bad for the long-term strategic military viability of our nation, right? If your little whoever, tiny podunk guerrilla group, terrorist group, or military in some part of the world, and you're ready to just go toe-to-toe with the U.S. military, just look at history. Your odds are pretty good. You don't have to be better trained or equipped or anything. You just have to have a will to hold on long term, the will to do whatever it takes and know that you're going to lose a lot of people, but as long as your people are dedicated to winning, eventually we're going to get tired and leave.
Yeah. I think I saw a lot of that, what you just said, in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they'd come out and fight. We'd have like people who are like, hey, I'm willing to fight the Americans, or they get told, hey, go fight the Americans. But strategically, a majority of them were starting to just hold back and play the waiting game.
Yeah.
They're just going to, all right, we'll just wait till you leave. And guess what? I've seen that come to fruition. All the areas we work so hard to take over, time and time again. And Sangin Valley, the whole Helmand River Valley area.
Yep.
The Taliban just took kind of like, we were handing their ass to them,
Yeah.
killing a bunch of them, and they kind of pulled back. They're like, hey, these guys are pretty fucking serious.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we turned it over to the Afghans, right, because it's all about nation building. It's all about, supporting them, the Afghans, and like helping them like make a beautiful, peaceful society,
Yeah.
And then the Afghans just abandon their post or get overrun and killed by the Taliban because the Taliban knows they're weak and don't have us with them anymore. And they just take back the same area we worked so hard and lost a lot of American lives and legs and limbs and arms and everything else trying to take. And they just play the waiting game. And they're smart.
Yeah.
And they also study our rules. They know our rules of engagement to the T. And they play they play within our own rule book.
Yeah. Just smart. I mean, a note on that, us doing the nation building while we really haven't technically won the war yet, it's schizophrenic. Yeah. It's like if I go and hold somebody hostage, if I put a gun to their head and I'm like yelling at the cops and stuff, because all the cops came, they're pointing their guns at me, but I got the guy because I just robbed the bank. And while I'm holding a gun to this guy's head, I'm also like, hey, man, has anyone talked to you about getting a college education? Or like, I noticed you could improve your hygiene a little bit. Like you're trying to like build him up. Yeah. Like while you also have a gun pointed to his head. No, that doesn't work. You can't be his friend and be the hostage taker. You got to pick one. Yeah. You got to pick one. Yeah. And we're trying to have both.
And then on the flip side of that, you have people exploiting it where my second deployment, we were plugged into this village, and one of the village elders was determined to be, he was labeled a village elder in our intel reporting system. And so he was basically protected at that point. But he was known Taliban. Yeah. Like known. He was the one that was in charge in there. He's an elder too. So he's like higher up, and he runs the Taliban in that village. Yeah. And he was coordinating the attacks on us. Yeah. Like the attacks that I got blown up in specifically were under this guy's directives. And guess what? We saw him almost every week.
You're over there talking to him.
Walk into our front door for our weekly meetings with the village, trying to like connect with them and everything. It's that whole thing you're talking about.
It's like I said, it's
the guys were fighting. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's crazy. And this. Everybody knows this. He knows this. He's laughing at us. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all a big joke.
Yeah. And so there's the obvious downsides that I talk about. We're not winning. It's bad in the moment and it's bad long term, but there's a little bit less obvious downside. And it's a little counterintuitive because you think total war going all the way, you think of it as this like very hawkish warmongering kind of perspective, but to me it's the opposite.
Yeah.
If we really approached war the way it was meant to be approached, we would be involved in less wars. When you look at when Vietnam was scheduled to be an 8-week military operation. 8 weeks.
Wow.
I mean, we declared victory in Iraq after what was it, a couple months? I can't remember exactly, but the point is we stopped calling these things wars. We call them military operations. We schedule them out as if the enemy doesn't have a say.
Yep.
And so essentially the requisite sacrifice to win in these conflicts looks a lot lower than it really is on the front end.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, we can do that, no big deal, you know? We're not going to kill very many civilians because it's not total war, it's limited war, and we're not going to have much cost and much losses of our own because again we're doing it like in this very limited capacity.
10-12 years later.
10-12 years later, 15 years. Like we invaded Iraq in 2003. 14 years later, we had some boots on the ground in Afghanistan in 2001.
Yeah.
It boggles the mind.
Yeah.
Like a few years ago, before I had kids, before Sam had kids, like I remember joking with some of my buddies, like, yeah, our kids are going to be fighting in Iraq too.
But
it's
that's
looking like
happening.
less and less of a joke.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
And then that leads to this other just kind of long-term problem. Like, if we as a nation, our government, does not honor the sacrifice of people in the military, people that have done some of the things that we've done, by actually making their sacrifice worthwhile, by putting a strategy in place to win, then people like us are going to quit having their kids join the military.
Yeah.
Instead of it being this like great family tradition, we're like, no, this is what we do, service. But so you'd be like, well, I'm glad about a lot of the lessons I learned in the military, a lot of the experiences I had, but I don't know that it's worth giving up your life for a cause that the people at the top are not dedicated to at all.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
There's no focus on maintaining exactly what you talked about is, this tradition that's been passed down in America of the military families, right?
Yeah.
Where we feel this pride in our heritage of, which I'd like to talk about some more.
Yeah.
But coming from, our fathers both serving and then, having grandparents and stuff like that have served, it's a tradition that's passed on, and we're exactly what you're talking about. Going about it the wrong way is starting to create a break in that American tradition, or just like any, I would say, warrior culture tradition that's passed on from family member to family member.
Yeah.
And what you do is you start losing that like high quality, warrior class.
Oh yeah.
And the warrior class is under attack in America itself.
Yeah.
It's not okay to be an alpha male, or to, be somebody who makes a conscious choice to like, hey, I'm going to go be a warrior,
Yeah.
To like go fight, like making a conscious decision. Like, I'm going to put my life in harm's way. Not even that, but just like have what it takes to go and be prepared to take somebody's life, and have people's lives taken around you.
Yeah.
Most people aren't equipped to deal with that nowadays.
It's not something we can identify with, most Americans.
And the system is like starting to just totally cut our type out. And that's, it's with the whole gender equality stuff, the identifying craziness that's happening in the military, not even just like in society. Like I get it. There's like ebbs and flows of, culture and counterculture, and people care about other people and all that stuff and want them to feel safe and okay with being themselves and all that. But in the military where we're concerned more about that
Yeah.
than, hey, we might have to shoot people in the face, or
Yeah.
like, I might need what it takes inside of me to like put my buddy back together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. People have started to see the military as not a means for defense of the nation, but as a means for like pushing social values, a means for gainful employment for the masses. It's like all these other things. The military exists because of the nature of mankind, which is that people kill each other, and sometimes they do it on small scale, like you see in cities and in the country, just one-on-one, just crime, and sometimes it happens on a large scale. And if you want to avoid being killed, and on that large scale, you need to organize and mount a defense, and it has to be effective.
Yeah.
And it has to not only be effective, but it has to be cost effective. Because if you use up all your resources doing it, and then you can't afford to do it anymore, then someone's going to come surpass you and beat you up. So you can't be wasting your money on turning it into a social club,
right?
On turning it into like some way to progress some social agenda. It's not that. It just isn't. It is a way. It is a hammer. You use a hammer to drive nails in.
Yeah.
That's it.
Man, do you think that there's... Oh, you know what I was going to say is I was reading your book, and just reading strictly the definitions of total war, I think helps explain it to people.
Yeah.
It's not, because when you say total war, people are probably thinking like, hey, we're just going out guns a-blazing, like, and dropping bombs everywhere, But literally in the definition from the dictionary, it's really not that bad. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
Like when you read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It covers like the nation side, like, hey, the civilian side being behind it, supporting it, totally, and having like an endpoint, basically like using the full nation's power to come to an end.
Yeah.
Like to end whatever the conflict is.
Yeah. Here's like a real good analogy I like to use. It's like if you and I decide to fight, right? You've got probably 10, 20 pounds on me. You're in much better shape than me right now. And if it was just straight up you versus me, you probably drive me into the ground.
Yeah.
But if you were like, well, I don't really want to hurt Paul. I mean, yeah, his like fists are bad and his feet are bad if he tries to kick me with those. So I'll hit those, but I'll avoid his neck and his torso and his face, or really any other soft area that could really damage him long term. And I'm not going to use all of my appendages. I'm just going to use one, because if I use too many, it could look bad to the other people around who know I'm stronger.
Yeah.
I would kick your ass. It would be terrible. And that's what America's been doing for the last 75 years.
Yeah.
We've been only trying to block the guy's punches and his kicks and avoiding the soft spots like the neck and the stomach and the eyes.
Yeah.
Going for those eye gouges. And we've been doing it with one hand. And the good thing for us is we're so much bigger than everyone else. We're like the 600-pound man, and we're like 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
And so we come out of all these scrapes alive, but eventually we're going to be smaller. And eventually we're going to meet that other guy who's big. And we're going to try to fight him like that, and we're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Big time.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what it is.
Like I said, I don't want to be on the receiving end of 400 artillery pieces.
No one does. No one does. No. No,
Ugh,
not
geez.
any artillery pieces, really.
No.
That's not
Not even one.
Yeah, not even one.
Your brother can attest to that.
Yeah. He can. He definitely can.
Man, but let's talk about our heritage. I know our family, for those of you that don't know, has some very almost a need to know. Like our fathers have done a lot of research when it comes to where we came from, our genetic pool, and all that stuff. You want to talk about some of the research you've done? And
Definitely. a while back, and I remember this growing up, my dad doing some of that research, your dad doing some of that research, and then just really recently kind of piqued my interest, and I just started going back. There's a lot of great genealogy tools you can use online. And first, I was kind of focused more on like the last couple hundred years, and I traced our lineage back to a guy named Abraham Brown, who moved from England. I think it was in the early 1600s to Massachusetts. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. That was 10 generations back, and seeing that heritage going all the way back that way. And at first, I was pretty satisfied with that. I was like, wow, this is when we came to England. This is came from England. This is where there's a house called the Brown House in Massachusetts still that was built, I think, by his son or grandson. I can't remember exactly, but then I got more curious, and I was like, well, what about before that? And so I started going back, and my dad had alluded to this again when I was younger, that he from the more limited research he'd been able to do, that there might be some like Scandinavian, aka Viking blood in us. And I started tracing, and once you kind of find a route into anyone that's more in the like royalty, nobility, or whatever, it becomes a lot more clear, the genealogies, because there's better records kept at those levels.
Oh yeah. Nobody cares about the peasants.
Yeah,
sorry to say. I mean, they were probably great people.
Yeah,
but
yeah. It just
back then
is what it is.
They didn't have Twitter and YouTube pages like mine to record their history forever.
I know, forever and ever. And so we start getting into these nobility, and it like very quickly you start seeing people in Normandy, and the Normans were Vikings.
Yeah.
They came to Rollo was a Viking who was just beating on France, I think it was in like the 900s or 1000s, something like that.
Just really getting after
just really getting
severing heads.
Yeah, he was. They did not like him, but they were pragmatic, those French, and so they gave him Normandy, France, and he became the Duke of Normandy, the first Duke of Normandy, Duke Rollo.
Yeah,
and he's one of our ancestors.
Yeah,
and at least according to the research I did, which I believe, because why not? I mean, yeah,
which
obviously.
Also. And then a separate route is we're actually also somehow we crossed streams or did a crossover, as Sam was talking earlier today, is we're actually related to Siegfried or
Snake in the Eye of Siegfried.
Sigurd.
Yeah.
Sigurd. Yeah,
Snake in the Eye of Sigurd. And it starts
which is the son of
Ragnar Lothbrok.
Yeah.
And it starts getting shaky up at that level too. You kind of like, all right, I'm pretty sure this is accurate. But it feels right.
Yeah, it does.
It definitely feels right.
It explains a lot of what I feel in the blood running through my veins. Mm-hmm. Like, it makes sense.
It explains why we move like every generation.
Yeah, and we were talking about that just the other night. How we as the Browns, we've seen people back in our family that they move to another spot and start something that's awesome. Like our grandfather that died. Before we knew him.
Yeah.
Left Ohio and
well, I guess he went down to Miami University in Florida. We talked about that. And he went to Chicago, and then I guess he was in Ohio again, and then he went to Arkansas where he worked as a manager in a factory. The factory went out of business, so he bought it out and started a new one, and it was successful. And he started a real estate business from that. I mean,
and he had a radio station. And
he did all. He was an entrepreneur.
I'm following in my grandfather's footsteps.
Yeah.
But yeah. And that's typical Norse Viking like fashion, is to go explore the world. They were the great explorers. I mean, they discovered America first.
Yeah, or at least from that side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Leif Erikson.
Yeah, as far as like, I mean, there's people obviously already here, but it's interesting. Yeah, that they pushed into like the Middle East and all those areas, like. And they would go and start stuff like Normandy.
Yeah,
they wouldn't always like go back and return to,
Yeah, you gotta go on to the next place.
Yeah, and settle in Normandy, and then that wasn't good enough, so they went into England and took that over.
And then old Abraham Brown just was like, you know what, it's getting stale. Let's go back to America.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the interesting like. Very basic research that I did that was kind of interesting.
Okay.
So I took all the work that your dad and my dad did, and that big spreadsheet they put together,
Mm-hmm.
and we had some really solid names back in England, and I was like, you know what? As much as Google has like collected data, I'm wondering if I can find something like just by Googling, and using Google Maps.
Yeah.
So I was able to actually find a like hospital that one of our great great grandfathers built in England.
Oh, wow.
And you can like pull it up in Google's map. It's named after him, all that stuff.
Wow.
And he made it. It was kind of like a charity deal.
Okay.
It was like a charity hospital,
Wow.
Looks kind of like a castle or something.
Yeah.
But so I found that and I noticed the area it was in, right? So then I'm like, how can I bring all this together? Because I had a feeling that, you read the typical, like the thing you can buy at a Renaissance fair where it's like, here's your name and like where your family's from and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in those, it always said that like Brown used to be Brun, like Brun.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to explore this a little more, which is like a Germanic and Norse like name.
Mm-hmm.
And it like goes back to like brown people or brown hair, or it could use to like describe your eyes or, any number of characteristics. And they use the term Brun. And I'm like, well, how did this shift to brown? Right. And I'm like, how did the Germanic Norse make their way to England? So I started exploring that, and I noticed that, yeah, they raided down into France. They were raiding England too, but like the big push from the Norse people was from Normandy into England, and like really taking it over and settling in.
Yeah.
And during that time, it was when Rollo, it was either one of Rollo's like sons or something made the big push. It was like King Harold or something.
That sounds right.
And they pushed into England and they defeated everybody. And they're like, okay, we're in charge now. And he decided, hey, I'm going to make money off of everybody, right? Because I'm going to collect. I'm the king. So he made what is known as the Doomsday Book. And this book was a huge census where they went all the way around England, his, people or whatever, his tax collectors.
Yeah.
And they did a very detailed census of people's names, job, and like the area they live in, right?
Yeah.
So you have this book that has like name, job, and like where they live or whatever. And that way they could like have a record. Hey, let's go collect money for that. And they know where to go and who's there and who to collect money from, right?
Right.
So in my research, I'm thinking, hey, if there is a way to look at this book, you should see the names Brun or Brown, right?
Yeah.
Because I was able to find Brown like out to like a certain date, but then there was like this gap. I'm like, where did Brun come into England? Or where did that transition happen from Brun to Brown, if that's the case?
Right.
Well, just so happens, they've taken this Doomsday Book and they've uploaded it online.
Nice.
Into a searchable, categorical, like, online archive.
Yeah.
And so I think to myself, okay, if Browns were in existence before the Norse came into England, then the Brown name should be in the Doomsday Book because they did a huge census of all the people in England, right?
Yeah.
So the name Brown would be showing up in there frequently if it was used, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? It's not in the book.
Really?
The name Brown, the huge English name, right? Very English name. I just met a guy from Wales the other day, and he's like, oh, your name's Brown. Like, oh, yeah, that's a very English name, right? Did not exist during that time.
Yeah.
Guess what I searched for? Brun. Tons of names.
Yeah.
And they were like scattered in kind of these different positions, and they kind of held positions of titles and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I started putting two together. I'm like, you know what? And then there was also Bruins like that came over with Harold, like in his like top guys or whatever.
Right.
So to me, that means our family pushed over with the Vikings into England, took over and set up shop. They were given lands because, they helped take it over. That's how the Vikings worked. You go along and you get part of the shares. And then at some point, the mixture of the languages between the Norse and the existing native English people, it switched to Brown.
Yeah. Some point in there.
Yeah. But it just kind of confirmed that, we are. It's just another route that confirmed sort of what we saw through the genetic testing too. And
yeah. I mean, that's all pretty cool, man. It's just like, it really makes you think. You really start thinking like, what would my ancestors think about this or that? What were they like? Obviously the further back you go, the smaller and smaller percentage you are part of that person. But it's still interesting because you can still see some of the same patterns in them that you see in our family. Yeah. So it just mathematically it shouldn't make that much of a difference, but it seems like it does.
Well, on a little more scientific level, this isn't really about Norse. I mean, my father had the genetic testing done through the Ancestry and National Geographic.
Oh, wow.
And the interesting thing about the National Geographic one is they give you a percentage of how your genetic code matches up to how much percentage of Neanderthal you are. Did you know this? So
I think that's a bunch of nonsense.
Really?
Yeah.
You should look into this.
I will.
So they're trying to say now that Neanderthals were like a separate species than human, and that we basically crossed streams at some point.
Yeah.
And so there's certain percentages of Neanderthal in people.
Yeah.
And a normal, like some people don't have Neanderthal apparently.
Yeah.
Or like very small percentages. And then like a high rate of Neanderthal is like 1.5% or something like that.
Yeah.
Guess what we are? Or my father is. It's
like
1.6, 1.7. So high on the Neanderthal scale.
Yeah.
Which also makes sense. Because Neanderthals were known as like this, we got the brow or, big brow, thick skulls.
I'm thinking we should get some helmets and get some more of these, and like wear them around.
For sure.
Even though that's not something the Vikings did.
No, not at all.
But they clearly should have.
Yeah.
Because of how popular it is.
Dude, I've seen some of the cool armor that the Vikings used to wear. I went to the National, Archaeological Museum in Ireland.
Yeah.
And, the Vikings raided the crap out of Ireland and England and everywhere else. But a lot of them settled there, too. They had some really cool stuff like old helmets, everything. They were not horned. They were like metal helmets with like the nose cover.
They were actually practical.
Yeah. Yeah. And the coolest thing was seeing a set of Viking bones that they had.
Yeah.
That they had found in these marshes in Ireland. Bodies get like preserved like crazy. They have bodies from like forever ago that you can still like make out like a lot of detail on. Wow. Like their skin's still on them and everything.
Yeah. They're like mummified basically.
Yeah, by the mud.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Like you just kind of die in mud. And there was like, they're able to see like, hey, this guy had like an axe wound in his skull and stuff like that. Like it's like very clear what happened to him,
Yeah.
Now the situation surrounding it, some of them were like their hands were bound and they had like an axe like wound in their skull and stuff like that. But this Viking dude, he was found in like a Viking burial site with like a boat and everything. And they had a sword there like next to him and everything. You could just tell like he was buried with his sword and like he was obviously like higher up on the scale, you know? But these bones were huge.
Really?
Like laying in this big glass case, he was like 6'5".
Wow.
Like or
like
6'2". 6'2" of skull. That's without like your
bones, so
without
the
your flesh and muscle and everything else that would like a little padding on the bottom of your feet and everything like that.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it, you're like, this dude was a monster of a man.
Yeah.
Like, there was definitely something to that. And if you look at the bodies of the other people they find in these marshes in like Ireland and stuff, they're like little people. And you start to really wrap your head around how all this lore that came around, like how devastating the Vikings were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And their shield walls, and they just come in and wreck shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes sense.
crazy.
They were basically like giants compared to these people.
Yeah. I always wonder, that makes me think of, the shield wall makes me think of like how warfare, the practices of warfare spread and everything. And I'm no expert on ancient warfare by any means, but the Viking shield wall always makes me think of the phalanx, of Roman and Greek style of fighting, of having a shield wall, and sort of maintaining that very tight unit cohesion, and you just let the enemy just kind of wear themselves out, and you like slowly pick them apart till they rout, and then you chase them all down and kill them.
Yeah.
And I a lot of times I wonder, are these all things? When you look at how far away Scandinavia is from, say, Greece, is this something a tactic that slowly traveled across the continent over hundreds or 1,000 years? Or is it something that just, kind of was developed independently because it's a good idea?
Yeah.
It's like
trial and error.
Hey guys, let's stand real close together with our shields,
Yeah.
see how that works.
And yeah, I mean, and then how the counter of that developed, right? So now it's all about dispersion. Like,
Yeah.
hey, let's not be too close together. So when an IED goes off that somebody steps on, it's not killing both of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, just any kind of incoming fire of explosives, artillery,
Yeah.
dispersion is key, like maintaining, all that, but also not being too far away.
Especially if you're fighting Americans, because we're going to drop some artillery on you.
Oh, yeah.
It's just...
But just think back to like the Civil War and stuff. You still had groups of people all bunched up together in lines, meeting each other. And eventually people were like, hey, maybe we should start putting some guys up in trees sniping and like doing some guerrilla warfare type stuff. Because this whole meeting each other, walking in the cannonball blast is not working.
It's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And, the musket fire, there were... Back in the earlier days of warfare when it was smoothbore, you could actually do that and not see these like absurd casualty rates because smoothbore was so inaccurate at distance. It's like, but then you get to the when we actually had muskets with rifled barrels, and everyone's putting like relatively accurate shots on each other.
50 caliber balls.
Yeah, 50 caliber balls, and they're all standing in a line. And it's like, wow. I think the death toll in the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War, was like 600 and something thousand or something.
Jeez.
It's still the bloodiest war of all time for the United States.
That's a perfect example of like that shift.
Yeah.
Where the old tactics weren't working.
No. No.
Have you heard of the Hussars? Polish.
The Hussars? Is it pronounced Hussars or Hussars? What's the reference?
It's they were Polish riders, like horseback cavalry. Mm-hmm. That they were famous for. I wonder if I'm saying that right. The Hussars.
Maybe.
Or maybe it's a different name. Am I screwing up the name? I feel like we should look it up. Because this is really important. But they were, if you want to look it up, I'll describe it.
Yeah.
They would ride horses, and this is right when like gunpowder is like starting to be a deal, and they have the big like blunderbuss type guns, muskets. And they would have like one of those, a cavalry saber, and they had these feathers, like eagle feathers, attached to wooden like arched things that were attached to their saddle, and they'd ride into battle, and they had these huge like, almost looked like they had wings.
You're saying it right. I think it's Hussar. For some reason,
Yeah.
I had always read it as Hussars.
Yeah. So I know a Polish dude. He's the one that told me about him.
Okay.
So
Is he
I'm pretty sure I'm correct on
the Polish special
Yeah. He was.
I've heard good things about those guys.
So the Polish Special Operations, I've heard are ridiculous. They're awesome.
Yeah.
This guy, he actually joined the U.S. service.
Okay.
He was my roommate in Afghanistan. He moved from Poland, and he worked in I think he worked in a little prison in Colorado as a sheriff's department, and then joined the Marine Corps.
Wow.
And was a recon Marine and then a Raider. But yeah, it was fun. We'd always talk about things like this and becoming warlords in Afghanistan. But yeah, that's just kind of cool dynamic. They would devastate. If you think about that time frame where it was people are still spears and I think they had a spear, a cavalry saber type thing, and eventually blunderbusses.
Yeah.
And they would ride into battle, and apparently these a lot of picture depictions of them now, they'll show them attached to their back, but there's actually not a way you can ride a horse full speed with that huge wind hitting those feathers and not blowing you off the horse.
Yeah.
So it was actually attached to the saddle.
Okay.
So it's strapped to the horse, but they would vibrate and these feathers and you think about a whole 1,000 dudes on horses, and how they say the ground used to shake when a whole bunch of horses are coming towards you. So you add that plus this vibration of all these feathers and wood on the know, and apparently it was just a huge mindfuck. It was just devastating.
Sound like a storm coming or something.
Yeah, and they would wreck shop, and they were kind of the elite soldiers, and they were sort of for hire too. I think the Polish king or whatever would let them fight for other armies and stuff. Would pay to have the hussars come and win battles for them.
Yeah, they were the Blackwater of their time.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, but man, that's cool. Just the way warfare develops. And from the medicine side, how some people think that for whatever reason, these wars we've been in aren't as bad or not as gruesome or difficult because we don't have as many deaths.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily the case.
Right.
War is war. We're still killing each other or trying to kill each other.
Yeah.
The difference is we've gotten a lot better at saving our guys. Even from the Vietnam War. We've made some great advances in saving guys on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Getting tourniquets on early and everything like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes a huge difference. And it's especially when you look at the difference in the death rates and the injury rates in Afghanistan and Iraq, it's huge.
Yeah.
And then you also look at the enemy's death rates, and they haven't gone down very much at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there are so many different ways to look at warfare and to focus in and zoom in and all that. And what I've been trying to do for the last couple of years is sort of zoom out and what is the big picture? What can we be doing differently? That was one of the reasons I ran for Congress. I would say, no, I wouldn't just say, I did have what I would call a very easy deployment.
Yeah.
But I know guys like you and Sam didn't, and there are guys worse off. Got plenty of guys died, plenty of guys lost limbs. We've got guys that have lost all 4 limbs, have lost their sight, and my thought was if they can give all that, the very least I can do is try to run for office to try to do something about it.
Yeah. Or the least our Congress could do is actually approve it.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Actually have some skin in the game.
Yeah. Either they need to officially approve it or officially denounce it.
Exactly.
There needs to be a vote.
But make a decision.
Make a
and
decision.
Own it.
Yeah. And that's the problem. That we haven't. First of all, we haven't declared war since World War II.
Yeah.
But the most recent authorization for use of military force was in 2002. Yeah. That was the Iraq authorization. The 2001 authorization is what authorized us to go out against Al-Qaeda and affiliates in Afghanistan. But we've been expanding into all these different conflicts, to Libya and to Syria and so on. And it's just like, I talked to people in Congress about this. I traveled up to D.C. to meet them and say, like, hey, let's get some movement on this. And they didn't want to touch it. They're like, well, we know that there probably should be a new authorization for use of military force, but what the White House is arguing is that the 2001 authorization is blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just nonsense. And they knew that it was more political exposure to take a stand one way or the other. They could just get away scot-free with saying, well, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my idea, it wasn't my plan.
Yeah.
It wasn't me.
It's sickening. But however, here's something interesting. Sam just told me that Trump's getting ready to meet with all the Senate.
I saw that.
About North Korea, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a step in the right direction.
That's huge. I mean,
for accountability, at least. At least he's saying, like, hey, I'm not out here on my own.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring everybody else and kind of like force responsibility for everybody that's been trying to dodge it.
If we're going to move on North Korea, there has got to be very substantive action from Congress.
Yeah.
There's got to be. And if the president wants to move on North Korea and Congress thinks he shouldn't, they need to make that very clear.
Yeah.
They got to take responsibility. Whether or not, one could argue all day about whether or not it is a good idea to do anything against North Korea right now. And there's a million different reasons you can throw out one way or the other. But at the end of the day, whatever we do, we need to take ownership.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, we're going to just end up in another 10, 15, 20, 30-year conflict where we're just messing around and guys come back messed up for years, and we don't actually win.
That's what concerns me about it.
Yeah.
I like to see steps like this, like bringing in the Senate, and stuff like that. I think it's necessary, and obviously things can't change in like 1 second from the failures we've been doing over the past 20, 30, 40 years or whatever. But I think it's scary to think that we are about to be fully engaged with North Korea, possibly. And we're also in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan still, which we're planning on retaking some of the areas that I was in the Helmand.
Yeah.
Again.
Which is...
And the Southeast Asia. Like...
yeah.
That's a lot of dispute going on there.
Like World War III, when's World War III going to happen? You could argue we're in it.
Yeah.
It's just a very low-grade kind of like... It's like a low-grade fever. It's not this high-pitched... thing, but what it makes me is it makes me sad because I just don't want any more people to die in these conflicts for no reason.
Yeah.
It gets kind of cliche. We kick a dead horse, but we gotta commit.
And it's hard to get that perspective, for me at least, when I was in the military.
Oh yeah,
and because it was all about you're training and you're doing everything for like the fight, right? So I'm going in to win and do the best job possible that I can at the mission I've been given.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's hard when you're in that grind of like getting ready for your next deployment, training up and everything. And that's what your focus is on. It's hard it's almost like you can't allow yourself to start thinking, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Like as a nation, more like from that level. When you're in it, you have to just be committed.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you are. You're committed with your life. Your life is on the line.
And so it makes sense that like guys would be like I wanted when I was in, I wanted to go to war with North Korea. I was like, this is the ultimate fight. Like, I could parachute in and be like skiing in the mountains in North Korea and do like ski shooting,
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Like,
and be reporting like, like the guys in World War II that dropped in behind enemy lines. Like, there's some cool stories about like the Scandinavian version of like the OSS guys like jumping in, like skiing behind enemy lines where the Germans had invaded up there. and they're like just them in a radio, and they're like reporting to ships, like sending information on.
I'm pretty
German.
sure that's who James Bond is based off
Yeah.
of, is like Scandinavian guys.
Oh,
like
you
that.
know what? That's how I know about that. It's the book Kon-Tiki. Have you read that? It's a story about the guys who they had a theory that the Polynesian islands were populated by people from South America, and they made a journey over the Pacific in rafts.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so they made a movie about it a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But the book Kon-Tiki is written by him, and it's or one of the guys, and it was a former like Scandinavian special forces dude
Wow.
that he basically came up with this theory while he was doing his studies, and he wanted people were like, no, that's not true. There's no way that people could go across the Pacific in a wooden raft. And he's like, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna go prove it. So he calls up his old war buddies who did all this stuff, and that's where I read all the stories.
Yeah.
It's like he's like, oh yeah, this guy, he was like dropped in behind enemy lines. It was like doing this type of stuff. And of course, when he called him up, he's like, hey, I want to take a wooden raft across the Pacific. Are you down? They're like, yeah, I'm on the way.
Wow.
There was like no hesitation from his buddies that were like doing that back in World War II.
Side note on that: when we're millionaires, because you're like have the most famous blog, podcast in the world, and also my salsa is like the most popular salsa in the world.
Yeah.
Like we need to get a sailboat or a couple sailboats maybe.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And like we need to like sail like around the Caribbean. Maybe we need to sail across the Atlantic, sail around the Mediterranean. Like maybe we need to circumnavigate the globe.
Yeah.
Maybe even a couple times.
I'm thinking like a total Legends of the Fall trip.
Yeah.
Maybe skip the opium den.
Maybe.
Have you seen that? Where he's Legends of the Fall?
I feel like
Brad
I
Pitt,
have.
and
I must have, but
he's like in World War I with his brother.
Yeah.
And his brother dies over there, and he's pretty messed up from it. So he like sails around the world and just like it goes on like elephant hunts and like ends up in an opium den for a while.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally down.
Let's do it. And like we can test out other theories too. Like maybe I don't know. We'll think of theories to test out. But
The coolest thing that like happened just recently this last year that's close to the Kon-Tiki thing is they're trying to prove that the Vikings sailed over to America and discovered it, and they just did that. They built a Viking ship to scale with like all the tools like what are the little nails? It's like even nails
yeah.
back then were whatever rudimentary nails they had and stuff like that, and the wood, everything was built to scale, and they just sailed it to New York.
Well, I feel like they just did that to prove that they could, because I know there was solid evidence of Viking settlements in North America and like Newfoundland and stuff.
But it was cool that they were kind of carrying on that tradition of again, it's our ancestry.
Yeah.
I mean, we're destined to get on a sailboat and go around the world. Anyways, but so it was just cool. He traveled down to South America. He wanted to do this to the T. So he went down to South America. They cut down trees there and like built everything from stuff you could find. Like,
wow.
And the way he got it sponsored was they brought out some like scientific equipment to do like a bunch of tests and kind of reporting in like marine life type stuff.
Right.
But it's an awesome story. I highly recommend you read that book. I read the book to Christina.
Kon-Tiki?
It was like a nighttime story time. And my father read it to us when we were growing up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But great story just about like perseverance and like how they survived the whole trip over there and they made it.
Yeah.
And like it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Sounds really cool.
But yeah, they were those guys that just like, that's what I would want to do when I was in. But once you get out, you start getting that perspective. It's like, okay, let's think about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's think about
Yeah.
going to like war with North Korea while we're in Syria, and you see guys getting wounded and dying still in Afghanistan. Like,
yeah. It's like all's quiet on the
what are we
Western
doing?
Front.
And then you also see the political side a lot more.
Yeah.
You see the lack of skin in the game from the politicians,
Oh, yeah.
and it's very frustrating.
Extremely, extremely so. I mean, even, and like, I don't want to call them out too harshly, because well, it is what it is. But there are plenty of even veterans in Congress that I do not approve of the way they have been handling in this. Like, they need to be leading the charge to say, no, we need to take a stand for this. The buck stops here.
Well, I'll say John McCain, I can't stand right now.
Yeah. God bless him. And he was a POW, and he served very honorably. And it's almost like you have to like say all that.
Yeah. But
the dude is an awful, awful legislator.
I can say he doesn't speak for all veterans.
He doesn't.
For sure.
No one, and no one does.
Yeah.
That's
no
the
one
truth.
does, yeah.
But especially not John McCain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, no one does, but John McCain, like, he's disappointing. You know? The way he's pushed us into getting involved with the Syrian rebels.
Oh yeah, I mean, real great idea.
Like,
solid plan here.
Syria. I mean, we could talk all day about Syria alone. I mean, you've got bad guys on this side and bad guys on that side. Which one do you want to support? Oh, neither. That's the one I want to support. Neither, because they're all bad guys.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's do like we do with most of the other wars where everyone are bad guys and just, I don't know, stay out of it. Let them figure it out. And it's become so politicized, like whether you get involved or not. Do you take the refugees or not? And on and on and on. Well, at the end of the day, we have no obligation to get involved.
Yeah.
We've seen that when we just get involved willy-nilly with these things, it doesn't get made better. And then what's the standard? Just because, like, okay, is our standard now anytime we see anything going bad, we get involved? What about in Darfur? What about in the Central African Republic?
Yeah.
What about in the
South
Democratic
America.
Republic of the Congo? In a number of places in South America, the recent genocide in Nepal.
Mexico
cartels. Why don't we just go everywhere and bomb everyone? That'll make everything better, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's kind of the logical path you have to follow if you go with this idea that we're somehow the moral police of the world.
Yeah.
We're not.
And besides the fact, I mean, that's what frustrates me so much is just how quickly people are beating the war drums over, seeing some video of some people dying.
Yeah.
It's like, guess what? People fucking die in this world.
All the time.
All the time from horrific stuff.
Constantly. A tree, dude, could fall down on this room and kill us both. War on trees.
But I'm saying, like, how about all the human trafficking that's going on in America?
Yeah.
Like, lives are ruined, kids killed. Like, let's put some spotlight on that. Let's take care of some stuff in America. And everybody's like, oh, that's like, what is the new term? Nationalism. Like, what? Oh, you just care about America?
Yeah.
Like, no, but I care about people, but we're not helping our own people.
When it comes to deciding what our government does, our government is responsible for the people of America.
Yeah.
And every government is responsible for their own people. There's nothing wrong with helping people outside of America, but as far as what a government is responsible to do, that is the main focus. That is the purpose of the organization that we call the government. Here's the thing. I've got nothing. I don't disagree with helping anyone anywhere. If you want to help a family from Syria, invite a family from Syria to come live with you.
Yeah.
I'm not, and I don't say that in like a sarcastic or mean way. I mean it. Like, that's probably a good way to help them.
Yeah.
Or send them a bunch of money.
Or go move over there.
Or go move there and make Syria a better place.
Yeah. But God forbid you make the decision to send my brothers there.
Yeah.
With no clear mission.
Yeah. Or just tell the government fix it like this.
Hey, we're working with both sides, and we're also kind of stepping on Russia's toes at the same time, and we're not clear, but we're also going to send you into North Korea. So also be ready for North Korea.
Yeah. Also.
And hey, go back into Afghanistan and take that area that you took 3 times before.
Yeah.
While you're at it.
And let's go ahead and ramp up the tempo in Iraq, and we got Libya and Nigeria and Somalia, and we're still trying to chase down Joseph Kony in Uganda. Do you remember that? Kony 2012 or whatever it was. Joseph Kony. He's the head of the Lord's Resistance Army. Oh,
not Boko Haram, is it?
Boko Haram's Nigeria. Yeah. Kony, it was funny, not funny, but funny. There's this guy, I want to say it was 2012, who created this video that went like totally viral. He's like, we need to draw attention to this guy Joseph Kony, who is like recruiting child soldiers in Uganda, in the jungles of Uganda. Legitimately bad dude for sure, just as bad as any other like random warlord in Central Africa.
Anywhere in the world,
Central. And the funny thing is, he got the attention, and we deployed a bunch of SF and MARSOC guys to like chase him around the jungle. And because of the changing dynamics of everything everywhere, by the time they were involved there, the Lord's Resistance Army, as it's called, wasn't even the main threat anymore. But we still had all these special operators on the ground spending all this money and time chasing him. I think we might still. By
the way, Africa is a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
Coming from being a medic.
Yeah.
You're looking at the chances of no evacuation, like sitting on a casualty for a long time in jungle conditions, and they probably have malaria or leishmaniasis or all other kinds of diseases that are found in Africa. Because guess what? If there is a communicable disease, it's in Africa, and it's also 10 times worse.
Yes. There's a reason it's called White Man's Grave.
Yeah.
And it should just be, and at least in some parts, just called grave. I mean, there are parts of Africa where the life expectancy is in the late 30s.
Wow.
And it varies from country to time. And a lot of it is like due to things like AIDS, but 30s, that's like Stone Age stuff. So yeah, let's send more troops to Africa. That'll make it all better.
I did a tropical medicine course, and it's not what actually it sounds like. You actually end up covering like altitude sickness and everything. Like you kind of do a review of a lot of the disease processes that are out there. And it's just like you look at the World Health maps of like diseases and like death tolls or casualties and stuff. And it's just like, stay out of Africa.
Yeah.
Like Africa is the
especially central.
Yeah, central. You just see this big blob in the middle of death.
Yeah.
From diseases.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, was thinking it might be cool to go check it out. Maybe still, maybe sometime, but
and if you go to North Africa,
not a really place I want to be deployed for an extended period of time.
If you go to North Africa, like say like Benghazi, Libya, just make sure that people like Obama and Susan Rice and Hillary Clinton are in charge, because you're gonna get attacked, and they're just gonna sit there and watch while your compound gets burned down, and your ambassador gets killed.
That's so frustrating on so many levels. And you see it. It's a sickness. It's a disease within the bureaucrats that have infested the State Department and our own military.
Yeah,
like you see it in Afghanistan and Iraq, everywhere, where people are watching with drones overhead, and they see you getting fucked up in a fight, and they have the tools to help you, and they don't.
Yeah. Ultimately, I'm not going to blame the drone technician guy, but he doesn't have authorization. He's like, I'm ready to end these dudes.
No, I'm talking about the command that's watching the same feed that the pilot, whatever. No, I'm talking about the decision makers.
Yeah.
Who can make a decision to help you out in a bad situation where, hey, guess what? Guys are going to be dying, but they almost need somebody to die first before they do something.
Are we 200% sure there are no civilians within 2 miles?
Yeah.
No.
And that started to bleed down even to the team level. We'd start to get guys that are really worried about stuff that didn't even make sense.
Yeah.
There was a guy that said, well, should we be shooting at that known Taliban point because they might bring up a busload of children? What? What in the hell are you talking about? And it's that sickness that's just filtered down, And
what's
it's
terrible?
just oh, we can't do anything because what if?
Besides, it's obviously terrible, but on the other hand, I can't even blame them for thinking like that because of all the guys that have gotten literally put in prison.
Yeah, literally.
Because they made decisions on the ground to fight a war that they got sent to. I understand there's some stuff that some guys have done that's pretty messed up, and I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about the guys that have like seen someone and reasonably believed that they were an insurgent and ordered the troops to shoot at them, and then those guys ended up in prison. That is unacceptable.
That's fucked.
Or the Marines that pissed on those Taliban bodies.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm smart enough that I'm not going to do it, or I'm at least not going to do it with a camera rolling, but I'm definitely not going to jam up some guys who are just mad because these are the guys that killed their buddies.
Yeah.
And the idea, logically, that it's somehow worse to piss on a dead body, which, again, I'm not defending, but worse to do that than to kill somebody, to take a life, that's backwards thinking.
Yeah.
You can't put someone in there, tell them to be a killer, an aggressive killer, and just turn it off and on like a light switch.
I think that's the gross misunderstanding of what it takes. And we talked about that kind of in the beginning of the podcast where we're losing the touch with guys like myself and the guys that like pissed on the bodies, you know?
Yeah.
We need us.
Yeah.
If we're doing these wars, you need guys like us. You need guys like that take it to the next level to win fights and win wars. And guess what? Shit gets a little crazy.
It's like Jack Nicholson.
We can get a little intense. You know?
You need me on that wall.
Yeah.
You can't handle the truth. It's like sounds crazy, but you need a little crazy if you're going to be in war.
It's crazy to the people that are betas, deltas, or whatever, you know, even not classifications, but just they don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't get what it's stake. They have no skin in the game. They don't understand at all, you know?
Yeah.
And they want somebody that they'd rather have somebody that's transgender and is concerned about the feelings of the Taliban than somebody who's willing to kill them and piss on their bodies.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what we're dealing with, this battle. And you know what I say to those people? My argument is, guess what? I identify as a savage warrior. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me be who I am, right? This is flowing through my veins. I'm a descendant of fucking Viking kings.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Warrior is in my blood. We come, our family members, you know, fought in the Civil War, you know, World War II. Our fathers were in the military. I was raised and bred for this.
Yeah.
Like, let me be who's in my DNA. That's who I identify as this, you know, this warrior.
And if you're not
so you need to start appreciating that and let me be who I am.
Well, and the flip side of that is if you're not going to let us do that, let us know on the front end so we can stop wasting our time and go become farmers or whatever thing we were going to do next.
Yeah, and just think about it.
Yeah.
Like as we're...
Yeah. You go crazy on some like buffalo that have like come into our lands.
But that's something interesting that I've read about in some of the... I've gotten into like reading Native American teachings and stuff.
Yeah.
Because we also have a little bit of Native American in us. And there's a really cool Native American teaching that kind of... it's called the counting coop. I think I'm saying that right.
I think I've heard of that.
And it's all about the warrior class within the Native Americans. It's this thing where you're basically like you're showing your worth as a man, like in the tribe, by doing feats.
Yeah.
It's like in battle being able to like get somebody's top notch, or just like cut off their hair or something, or like take one of their weapons.
It's like a game you play in warfare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I really challenge people that have a difficulty, like, you know, identifying with the mindset that we have as like intense warriors.
Yeah.
To read that, and it'll help give you a little understanding of like how it is a natural thing. It is a very like, it's not a crazy psychopath thing.
Yeah.
It's a natural human process, and it's very even natural to like the earth and the dynamics of species and interaction with each other. And anyways, I'd like to cover that in another podcast where
you should talk a lot more.
I'm going to pull up the reading. It's a short little reading, and I'll do that in another podcast. We're at an hour and 15 minutes right now, so
okay. Well, I got a little more time, but That actually, so what you were talking about makes me think, we're also got a little Jewish blood in us too.
Yeah.
And I like to, I think a lot. I mean, my dad's a missionary. I've grown up reading the Bible a lot, and you've grown up reading the Bible. And like lately, I've been thinking a lot about back when the Israelites, were surrounded by like the Philistines and the Ammonites, and just but especially the Philistines. If you were a warrior if you were a man in Israel or in Philistia for that matter, you grew up fighting all the time.
Yeah.
Your enemy was just right there, and it was just like, well, we're going to go fight the Philistines. And the Philistines like, oh, well, we're going to go raid the Israelites.
And we're talking swords, spears, and rocks.
Yes.
We're pretty much the weapons of the day.
Yes. I mean, King David, the most famous king of Israel, killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
He killed, he just annihilated everyone.
He was a savage.
He was a savage. And I think about that, we cannot, even those of us that are in the warrior class, we deploy and we come back. These guys lived every day of their life in this world where they were just fighting and killing all the time.
Yeah.
There's this one passage that said, in spring, the time when the kings would go out to war.
Yeah.
Hey guys, it's spring, it's wartime. That's how they did it.
Yeah.
And they'd probably fight until they got tired and they depleted their resources and they had to go back home and tax all the poor peasants so they could do it again next spring. That's what it was. And we're so far removed from that. And I'm not saying that that's a better world.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that when we try to cover up that part of human nature and try to make this argument that no, it's just society's bad, people are good deep down inside, if we can just fix society, we'll fix people, it's a lie. Society springs out from what humanity is, and from the very earliest time people have been killing each other all over the world, in every culture, in every society.
And even take humans out of it, who else do we share this earth with?
Animals. They kill each other too.
On the reg.
Yes, on the reg. I'll bet somewhere in your yard there's some little bugs right now, just killing each other, just because they're like, you came too close to my section of dirt, man.
Yeah.
Which is basically what it comes down to.
What was that I seen recently? It's like an animal you wouldn't expect to be eating another animal. It's like a rabbit eating a squirrel or something.
Yeah, man.
That's the nature of the earth we're on.
Yeah.
It's part of it. And to sit there and pretend it doesn't happen, or, declare I'm not going to harm any animals, I'm going to be a vegan. Well, I got news for you. I really like trees. I like plants. And you're killing those on the reg.
Yeah.
You plant eater.
Yeah.
Killing all those beautiful, life-giving plants that are feeding me oxygen, and you're just tearing them up. Meanwhile, I'm trying to lower the carbon footprint by eating animals.
I actually wanted to start a website about that, make up a couple of ridiculous causes. One of them would be about people that eat plants.
I don't think that's a ridiculous cause. I actually believe in this cause.
Plants are nature's most peaceful creatures.
They're not harming anybody.
They're
giving us oxygen.
And then here's one of the other causes that I would put in there, and it is solar inequality. Did you know there are people in the world, around the equator, that get more sunlight than people who are further from the equator?
They're pretty privileged then.
Super privileged. The solar inequality we're talking about here is unprecedented.
Yeah.
And, all I'm asking for